Pleasant good morning to our listeners and viewers across the state of Grenada. Pleasant good morning to our media personnel here and via Zoom. A pleasant good morning to you, the citizens of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Welcome to this most important press conference held by the new National Party. After 1 year of being in opposition, this press conference has been convened to address some of the critical issues affecting the nation and its citizens. Joining me this morning on the panel is, to my extreme left, the Honorable Kate Skeeter Lewis-Peters, Member of Parliament for the constituency of St. Andrew North East. To the middle, we have the party chairman, Mr. Oliver Joseph, and to my immediate left, we have the Honorable Dr. Clarice Modeste-Cohen, Member of Parliament for St. Mark. Each of the panelists this morning will discuss various areas that are of concern not only to the main opposition party, the New National Party, but to its citizenry. The Honorable Kate Lewis-Peters will discuss issues affecting youth and youth development throughout the state. The party chairman, Mr. Joseph, will discuss issues affecting the state's economy, and the Honorable Clarice Modeste-Cohen will discuss issues of health and national security. Good morning and welcome to all of you. I now hand over to Mr. Oliver Joseph, party chairman.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are viewing us at this press conference. And to my other panelists, it's a pleasure to be here to address you on matters that are pertinent to our country, Grenada, as we move forward. So 1 year ago, we had a change in government, and we became the opposition. Of course, as an opposition party, we are the government in waiting, and so we closely monitor the performance of the current government. But in doing that, we need to understand the philosophy of the government. And to do that, we need to look at the policies that the government have introduced. Because what we need to do is to build a just society, not just build an economy. In building a society, we are talking about people and how we can improve the lives of our citizens, of all Grenadians. When we measure that against the policies of the government, you realize that the fiscal policies of the government over the last year has not helped lift the ordinary people out of poverty or help raise the standard of living. For example, the policy of the government to remove all the taxes from petrol, the petrol tax, to zero instead of keeping it at the cap of $15, did not see any tangible benefit to the poor. Because what you did, give up millions of dollars in taxes, and the only people that benefited were the vehicle owners, because nothing was passed on. The cost of transportation was not dropped. The cost of freight did not reduce. The cost that passengers, students, and the elderly, everyone had to pay, there was no change. So the only people who benefited with such a policy was vehicle owners. And then the policy was changed, and now gas prices are above what it was capped at, the $15 it was capped by the NMP government. Gas prices way above that now. So this policy is not one that benefited the working class. Also, placing tax on sugar in order to address the problem of diabetes and other health issues. That is not a policy that would help reduce the incidence of diabetes. But there are a lot of examples of countries throughout CARICOM. You did not have to go far to see what was done by the other governments, because placing tax on sugar is placing a burden on the poor and working class. And that is the effect of it. And in addition to that, you have the high cost of living. And everyone in Grenada could attest to that. The rapid rise in the cost of living. And the government came up with a policy to cap freight at 2019 levels for 6 months. There was no immediate benefit to people. We did not see the reduction in prices of basic food items by this policy. So when you examine the policies of the government, it is not one that is meant to lift people out of poverty. And that is our concern as an opposition party, looking at the performance of the government. We want to see, instead of sending people home, as is this government's policy, ordinary working class people. For example, we had a program where when we give material for housing, people complained that they could not get labor to repair the houses, or in some cases to build the houses. And therefore our response was to create housing brigade in every constituency. In every constituency in Grenada, approximately 200 people employed in the housing brigade. And the bathroom and toilet, when we said we're going to introduce the bathroom and toilet for the poor and vulnerable, over 200 people again was employed in this housing bathroom and toilet brigade in order to assist the poor. And what this government has done is announce the WASH program. We're already coming up with his name, because the Rotary Club in my area, St. Joseph's RC School, had a WASH program where they repair all the toilets and provided water to the school. So that's not nothing new. So everybody, I mean, the Rotary Club was shocked when they heard the government claiming that it was an initiative of the government to have this WASH program. And what you have noticed in 1 year, nothing happened, because they sent home all these workers, and you announce a new program and nothing happened in the first year. So we are calling on this government. We are saying that, please, in building a society, you need to build a society where everyone is involved. You cannot have policies that alienate one group of people. And when you look around the country, small businesses are complaining, they are suffering because money is not circulating in the rural areas or throughout Grenada. All small businesses, I challenge anyone to go around the country and ask small businesses how they feel. When we have a seasonal program, what you call it the bushing program. They went into Parliament and have a nice name, but not a single debushing young outside, you know. So we had that, and you put out 2,000 people to work seasonally. Grenada is not the only country with seasonal program. The most developed countries have that. We still send seasonal workers to Canada to work. So these programs, sometimes 3 times a year or 4 times a year, you see these people coming out and keeping the environment clean. And that's how they earn the money to send the children to school. Already we start receiving so many calls for children going to secondary school for help. Well, that is not the way These people do not want to come and ask politicians for help. They want jobs. All these people you send home, they want jobs. I recall my experience in the constituency when we had the debushing program on. The average people that come to see me move from 40 to 10. What I tell you. And that was the experience of every MP. People want to work and earn their money. They do not want to go and beg. So that was a way of ensuring that these people earn their income and could be able to sustain the family and send their children to school and provide for them. And that is the kind of just society we are building. And so the measures as announced by this government and from their action is not one that favors the working class. I now move to the question of the high unemployment in the country. So the government announced there is growth. Yes, there is growth, but what is the purpose of having growth with no jobs? Jobless growth would not help you. You need to reduce the unemployment, to put more money in people's pocket. The more money people have and the most they spend in the economy, the more the government will collect taxes, and then they could use the taxes to do their programs. That is as simple as it is, you know. Reduce the high unemployment in the country so that people will have disposable income to spend. Then we look at the question of the payment of pension, and it was said that the NMP did not pay pension. Well, let me set the record straight. Since 1983, with the Pension Disqualification Act, there were several governments after that, from 84. You had, you had two previous NDC administration, and the NNP were there, but you had this act, which is the Pension Disqualification Act. And in 2018, as a result of the court ruling in the Humblin-Armstrong case, we stated that the effective date of the Pension Disqualification Act should be 22nd of February 1985, when it was gazetted. So although it was passed in 1983, it was gazetted in 1985, and therefore all the persons who joined within that period of time, that is February to 83 to April 83 to February 85, they were owed pension, and the NNP government in 1981 paid $7 million in pension and gratuity to 56 public officers that were qualified. We set up a secretariat and asked people to come forward, just like this government continued with this pension secretariat. And that's how we came up with the numbers and paid. And when the ruling came out on the 29th of March 2022, when the Constitutional Court ruled that the Pension Disqualification Act was illegal and therefore null and void, we did not appeal. We said that we will pay every worker that was qualified to receive pension will be paid. And we set up a committee to advise us on the best way forward. And we put everything in place to start the payment of pension. So if it is that NMP did not want to pay pension, the question is, why didn't we appeal? We did not appeal, but instead took the decision that we will pay. When the government came in, they paid out $75 million, and that was done only because they met the resources there and they admitted that. Well, of course, they had to admit that because they will have to explain where they got the 75 million from. So it was obvious that it was there. They did not have to borrow to pay. Unlike when we came into office in 2013, where the government at the time was selling assets to pay salary, and the population knew that. So they were shocked when they got paid at the end of February on time in 2013. And we continued paying salaries on time. And because of prudent fiscal management over the last 9 years of the NMP administration, this government could have boasted of meeting a pregnant treasury full of money. We hope that they will have fiscal policies and prudent fiscal management that will ensure programs that will lift the poor and working class from the situation that they are in currently. Also, when you look at what is taking place within our society today, it's good to look at numbers and talk about how we have been achieving, but as I continue to see, we want to see a more just society, more equitable society, and a society for all Grenadians. So that will be my opening position at this time, and I'll come back later.
Thank you very much, Chairman Joseph. Before we accept any questions, we move to the Honorable Clarice Modeste-Cohen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and a pleasant good morning to all who are here in this hall with us, and to those who are listening on through whatever medium you are listening, whether it be radio, whether it be live streaming, and welcome to our press conference, 1 year in opposition. I'm going to be speaking primarily on health and maybe one or two other things which are hinged with health, social security, and a bit on the crime. So I'll start off with health, because we all know that health is of paramount importance to every individual and to every country. So health is important to us. We all need to take responsibilities for our health, but there are responsibilities that only the government can handle, and in every state in the world, that is how it is. Individuals do their bit, but the government has certain responsibility that it must shoulder. So I want to take this opportunity to reinforce the fact of personal responsibility to our citizens to do whatever they can to promote their health. Let us all do that. Let us look at healthy lifestyles, what we eat, what we drink, and exercise. And if medications have been indicated for us, we need to take those medications. And medication is one of my main issues with government, as well as other medical supplies. So my major problem here this morning is with how the government has reneged on its responsibility to the nation when it comes to health. I have spoken for several weeks, several months, about the long list of unavailable medical supplies. And I'm not only talking about medication for pressure and sugar. I'm talking about what they call reagents, materials to test in the laboratory, because sometimes before you can indicate or write a prescription, the doctor has to know what is the situation. So things like CBC, which have been lacking, to know what about your white blood cells, your platelets, and so I don't want to go into too many technical things, but to check your blood, to see if your blood good, if your blood high, whatever. And then the medication may have to come. And that has been sadly lacking for months. I have raised this matter in Parliament. I raised it in the last 2 sittings. In the previous sitting, someone answered, and the records would show. There was an answer that completely dissatisfied the nation. I think even their supporters were not happy with the answer we got, that we trying to deal with the payments and so on and so on. And I raised the question, there seems to be no inhibition when it comes to raising money for travel and for other things to increase the salary of ministers in short order after they got into to office, because they thought we were making the money. But now they realize we are the ones who were committed and making the sacrifices. And they came into our system unprepared to make any sacrifice at all for this nation. So I got an answer. And it was a total of $2 million when they met a full treasury by their own admission. And so the reason given was that some of it was owed by the NNP in 2021. But we are at a time when we're closing 1 year of NDC in office. I want us to just rewind a little bit and compare that to NNP taking office in 2013, February of 2013. There we met an empty treasury. An empty treasury. And so salaries, monies had to be found for salaries, as mentioned by Brother Oliver Joseph, our chairman. But money had to be found for other debts that we owed in order that supplies could flow into the country. We were owing the OECS PPS $7 million. And in short order, we engaged them. We made payments. I do not recall the installments of the payments, but they agreed on a payment plan, which they usually do with every government because the OECS PPS is there to serve us. And in short order, we had medication flowing. And I want to say, because people will say, well, shortages happened in your time. Yes, it happened in NNP time, but it has never been so bad as it was when we met it in 2013. And again, it has never been. So I think these are the 2 periods in time when Grenada suffered the most for shortage of medical supplies. Last week, I raised the matter again because I had a long list before, and I kept hearing that the list has not shortened significantly. And some of them are very critical medication. So I raised it again in Parliament in the section where we as opposition are allowed to speak, not by the government of the day, but by the standing orders of Parliament. And so several of us in opposition spoke on different things on the adjournment. I raised it again as a concern. And what shocked me was that no one was brave enough to answer, to give us some hope, because I was saying we're approaching 1 year in the next day or 2, and let us give us something to celebrate. And what NNP would have, one of the things NNP would have celebrated is the flow of much needed medical supplies into our country. You know, the Prime Minister, Dickon Mitchell, Honorable Dickon Mitchell, Prime Minister of Grenada, Carriacou, Petit Martinique, he stood up sometime after, I think there were 1 or 2 speakers between, and he said absolutely nothing. You know, I looked at the arrogance and the uncaring way, because health is so essential, I don't need to go into it. And he said nothing. A few others on the other side, on the government side, stood and they said nothing. And up to now, we have heard nothing more. But I keep seeing a list that is lengthening. We're talking about dressings. We're talking about supplies needed for surgery. We're talking about medication that the same persons that they have taken the $150 from could have gone and pay a few dollars in the district pharmacies, in all of the district pharmacies. Many of them are no longer available. And so this is seriously compromising quality patient care. And I want to call on the government of the day to forget who didn't do what and what was left over from 2021. You have completed 1 year, and I believe that the government has a responsibility to this nation, and they have reneged on that responsibility to serve the nation, and they need to catch up on that matter. So I have seen nothing. I want to take this opportunity to thank a niece of mine she lives in the US, and she sent supplies when we were in the COVID crisis. And she has been very instrumental in getting another container to come to Grenada. We did not look at which government was in office or who would look good. What we wanted was a little bit more dressings, a little bit more gloves, because I understand there are no gloves, and I'm seeing a very troubling list of medication that is not just in short supply, but is nowhere to be found. So I know when she sent before, and I'm waiting on a list from her, there were a number of items that we are missing now that were sent, that was available before, and I look forward to see that. But I want to reiterate again that one of the jobs of the government is to fulfill the duty of the nation where health is concerned. I want to just briefly mention the issue of staffing, because it's an issue that we must have a conversation on, must be addressed at the government level, at the national level. It is so critical, because you can have all the medical supplies you want, but if you do not have people to administer it, if you do not have doctors to prescribe, nurses, nursing aides, and so on, we will be in serious trouble. So the NDC government promised to work magic. They could solve everything under the earth. And at this time, 1 year later, we have seen nothing in the key areas of concern. But we're hearing a lot of plans and a lot of promises. So I'm hoping to see some of the magic happening in the not too distant future. And linked to the healthcare system, we have to look at the mental health status of the people in our country. And some of the factors mentioned by our chairman, Brother Oliver Joseph, are factors that could contribute to destabilizing the health of the individuals and the nation. So I must talk about social safety nets and the fact that a party who promised to increase people's seed money to over 650, because they said anything under that was abject poverty, I think it was the term, but something like that, that reflected abject poverty. Instead of that, the one little $150 that NNP saw it fit to add to the seed money to enable the indigent to cope with the ravages of COVID. We're still suffering from COVID. And that was taken away from them. Some persons with several disabilities, with a number of dependents in the family and so on, they had all of the seed monies taken away from them. If that is not a serious contributor to health problems, I do not know. So the administration really is waging a war on the indigent and the low-income persons and even the middle-income persons. And I want to beg my brothers and sisters, yes, you may like a party, you may serve the party, you may be related to them. But when it comes to healthcare, the need for healthcare can attack any one of us at any time. So the number of persons who have been sent home from their jobs, and my brother used that term, what did he say? Jobless growth. So that is nothing to be proud of. We cannot be proud of jobless growth because the people out there are suffering, the businesses are suffering, and they are balling. And how this government of the day is not hearing or not heeding, I do not know. So, my dear brothers and sisters, the healthcare is a very important factor, and the social services can help in situations where persons need to do, because the old people tell you, well, I could buy my medication, I could pay for my light and my water and so on. But all of these things have been taken away. And of course, there is no enabling environment in our country to create jobs. So we boast about growth, but again, I must take the phrase coined, jobless growth in our country. I am thankful that government is a continuity. So, our continuum, as he said. So, if we talk about growth in construction, that started under NNP. Key for that, growth in the private sector, but also the government did its part. But what we're seeing today, in terms of whatever construction has been accomplished in the past year or is ongoing, is because of, thank God, for NNP, who started those projects. That's why we still continue to see growth in the construction sector. So, my dear brothers and sisters, I also will mention briefly the issue of crime. We're halfway in the year. We're in June. And 6 months into the year, my understanding is that we have recorded more crimes than we had recorded in all of 2022. I am not saying that with pride. I am not saying that with any vindictiveness towards the government in office, but I am saying to the Minister for National Security to wake up and deal with the matter before it gets too far. One of our flagships, one of the things that we were always proud about was the safety and security in Grenada, and that lured tourists. So even tourism that has contributed to the growth of the economic growth of this country, that was seriously conditioned by our national safety that we were proud of. And I have listened to a number of the interviews and the presentations by our present Prime Minister, but I don't know if I missed anything. I have not heard any concern about the level of crime in our country and what the plans are. I heard other plans, but not what the plans are. And I want us to take a back step again to when NNP was in office, and some years ago, we had various gangs and fighting and so on. The crime rate was going up. And NNP jumped into the fray, the NNP government, and they invited the social partners, join us, let us see what we can do. I remember personalities in the churches and other areas came out. They met with those people. They engaged them, tried to find out what. And one of the things I remember that they did, that we did, was to find jobs for them, find out what was the situation, find out ways to engage them, little training and so on, so that they could feel the necessary importance, that they are important in our society, and they were helped in that way. So there are several examples of what we have done in a lot of areas that NDC does not need to reinvent the wheel. They can rebrand. They can call it whatever name. They can take the statistics. They can take the kudos. But please, NDC in office, Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell and the team, remember you went in office because of the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, and you're there to serve them. Give them a little bit of service, please. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Modest Cohen, for that. We now turn over to the Honorable Kate Lewis Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and let me begin by extending a pleasant good morning to all our viewers and listeners across the various platforms, as well as the media personnel joining us here this morning. As the former minister with responsibility for youth development, I am always prepared to discuss matters of national importance, particularly those pertaining to youth development within our country. The future of our nation rests in the hands of our young people. Therefore, it is crucial that they are adequately provided with the necessary resources, opportunities, and support to thrive. We have observed that for the past year, there has been a lack of new initiatives from the Ministry of Youth to support our young people. And while we have seen that some of the existing programs have been continued, we are totally dissatisfied with the minimal efforts made to fully realize the benefits of these programs. Let's look at the New Imani program, for example. It was announced that this program will be moving to the National Training Agency, NTA. Since then, trainees are feeling discouraged due to the uncertainty about the status and about the benefits the program will provide to them. During our time in office, trainees received several benefits under the Imani program, including educational enhancement through institutions like TAMCC, NULO, SGU, and other universities. They also received CVQ attainment at various levels and on-the-job training with great prospects for permanent employment. Another important program is that of the Empower program, designed to empower our young men. Upon graduation, our administration provided the necessary tools and equipment, along with support from our Youth Biz department so that they can establish their own small businesses. However, today, this current administration only graduated them from the program without offering any type of support to help them progress further. Furthermore, it appears that the Youth Entrepreneurship Program, Youth Biz, no longer exists, resulting in a lack of support for our young entrepreneurs through this program. Project Fly, fostering level-headed youth, another important program that targeted and empowered young people at the community level, no longer exists. And while we commended this government for the Creative Industries Conference, this was only a 3-day event. We heard the announcement of concessions for our young creatives many months ago. However, to date, this has not been implemented. Therefore, because of government's failure to effectively deliver on these programs or to introduce any new program to our young people, they are now marginalized. Moreover, the promises made to our young people during the election campaign, including that of making all Imanis within the public service permanent in the first 12 months of being in office, has proven to be nothing more than empty words. They placed their trust and confidence in this government, believing that their concerns and aspirations will be addressed. Regrettably, these promises have remained unfulfilled, leading to a deep sense of disillusionment. Therefore, to restore the trust of the young people, we must hold this government accountable for their commitments, ensuring that they follow through with the pledges made to our young people. Furthermore, we have seen a great increase in youth unemployment. It is alarming and demands immediate attention. Young people are being sent home from their jobs, often without adequate notice or support. This does not only hamper their economic prospects, but it also impacts their overall well-being and sense of purpose. We must prioritize job creation initiatives tailoring to the needs and aspirations of our youth. These should include vocational training programs, entrepreneurship support, and access to mentorship opportunities. When we equip our young citizens with the necessary skills and resources, we are empowering them to become valuable contributors to our economy. Compounding these challenges was the reduction in the budgetary support for youth development. Government's decision to cut funding for youth initiatives reflects a lack of commitment towards nurturing the potential of our young generation. It sends a disheartening message that their needs and aspirations are not their priority. We therefore advocate for the restoration and the increase in the budgetary allocation for youth development and ensure that funding is prioritized to create programs that will empower our young citizens, promote education, skills training, and address youth unemployment. In addition to these pressing issues, we have seen the rise in crime among our young people. Recently in St. Patrick, of course, we empathize with the families. However, this rise in crime is deeply concerning. My colleague just explained. However, the termination of the only clinical psychologist on the island further exacerbates this problem. We must recognize that addressing crime requires a comprehensive approach that includes mental health support and intervention programs tailoring to the specific needs of our young people. It is therefore crucial that government reinstates the position of a clinical psychologist and bolster our mental health infrastructure, providing accessible and effective counseling services to our young population. If we fail to create enabling environments and opportunities for our youth, how can we call on them to seek and find opportunities to empower themselves? We need a government that goes beyond empty rhetoric and takes concrete actions to foster an ecosystem of innovation, entrepreneurship, and investment. As I conclude, I urge the government to take immediate actions to address these pressing concerns. And therefore, I recommend the following. 1, establish and enhance youth engagement programs and projects that provides a platform for young people to be empowered so they can make their contribution to national development. 2, fulfill the promises made to them during the election campaign by implementing tangible initiatives such as vocational training programs, entrepreneurship support, and employment opportunities. 3, allocate a sufficient budget for youth development and ensure that funding is highly prioritized as a travel budget. And finally, involve various stakeholders such as the social partners, the church community, community influencers and leaders to assist in curbing youth violence and crimes among this young generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Kate Lewis-Peters. We now open the floor for questions. Those media persons via Zoom, we ask that you use the raise hand feature on the platform, and we will indicate to you so that you can go ahead and ask your questions. questions? No. We have one question here.
My first question is to the chairperson. In terms of the Grenada Development Bank, in the process of getting a loan itself for students, the process includes having land as your asset, so they acquire land, plus they ask for lawyer fees. Lawyer fees usually amount to $7,000. That money alone, how is that helping the students who go to get a loan but still has to pay so much in order just to get the loan itself? And the process of getting the loan is quite lengthy. For example, if a student is accepted to school in April, the loan itself, through conversation, will take about 3 to 4 months. Notwithstanding that, that student also has to get a student visa to attend that school in August. So what are your thoughts on developing this particular area of education?
Thank you very much for this question. We dealt with that when we were there. The same issues that you raised about collateral from students, the duration, the length of time which it takes for a student to get a loan, the repayment, and we came up with a new policy to assist students. So I'm not sure if this new policy has been changed. If you're talking about recently within the last year when you approach, it means that they went back to the old way, because we even decided, based on a recommendation coming from the bank itself, the government decided that there are some students that are considered as vulnerable, and therefore will make it easier, and the government will put up the security for these students. All they had to do was to sign on to the bond to say they will come back and serve the country. So I don't know if that changed, but all the issues you raised there, we addressed that during our time.
Thank you very much. We now turn to Nancy Maguire.
Good morning to everybody. I wanted to ask about the tax on sugar. In Barbados, they had introduced a tax on sugar to address the level of diabetes and other concerns with, well, particularly students in schools. And it apparently has done some good in the sense that there are alternative beverages that are being made available for students. So I'm just wondering, if you're not going to raise tax, if you didn't raise tax on sugar, what would you do to address this issue? Thank you.
Nancy, I'll endeavor to answer you. And if you want figures or anything, well, of course, you know the man who knows figures. But just in terms of a concept of how to handle that, there is nothing wrong with putting a tax. But what is wrong is you put a tax on something and people still struggle. People still struggle to use that commodity. It only worsens an already bad situation. And I recall, and the Hansard would bear me out, when this bill was brought into Parliament, one of the things I said, and I remember I think the leader of the opposition, other persons mentioned it, they need to educate people. They need to have services out there and we have medical stations all over, and we have different media. The government has a media house, and to educate people on the dangers of sugar, because it is dangerous. And this doesn't affect me personally, and a number of us may not be affected because I use very low sugar and sometimes no sugar. But that doesn't solve the problem for the person who is not educated, who is not trained, who is not encouraged. So there are no programs for that, but you increase, you put a tax on it. So all people do is struggle to meet it because they need the sugar. So it has to be a many-pronged approach. If you're going to do that, educate the public, have programs to assist them. You also need to have medication. Because if people can't get medication for the diabetes, and then you come in and put a tax on the sugar, it looks as though you're putting more weight on queen sugar, more burden on the low income and no income persons. So I think one of the things that should have been done before and still could be done to make it sensible is to educate persons, do programs, and the government did say they had an increase. I don't remember the name of the program for health that they brought in, because they go on new names. The washing, the whatever, new names. So they brought in new names and they brought in a budget. But I have not seen that budget roll out into meaningful healthcare programs. And that is our beef, that you just raise it so it becomes a burden. And anything that a government imposes that is a burden to people, something is wrong with the process. So maybe it's the process, and we cannot only follow Barbados. We also have to see what other countries can have been doing, and I think that is one of the things that our government needs to do. What are other countries doing? We have to look at the schools, the schools, what we offer them, train the cooks and so on, train the cooks so that they do proper diet. And I know under the new National Party, there were training programs. There were training programs for the cooks to educate them as to how to prepare diets for the children. And we also have to engage the vendors, because to just send the vendors home with no hope doesn't make sense either. But maybe some training for them, let them know what will be acceptable to be sold in the school grounds and so on. Do more of the fruit days. And I know some schools are still doing it, which started under NNP. They go to school with their fruits. So I have heard children say, Mommy, today's fruit day. I need a banana, I need something. So I think there are things like that to discourage the use of sugar and to encourage the use of more natural foods and so on, and foods that are almost low in sugar or no sugar. And perhaps then you can implement the tax if the government is so minded. So in and of itself, there is nothing wrong, but the way it is done, it is a burden on the poor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Modest. Okay. Linda Stricker.
Good morning to you and everyone at the head table. I have a number of questions. My first question has to do with around the world, one of the drawbacks of COVID was the shutdown of the world, as we recall, and this has led to a whole load of supply chain problem. One of the areas that has been affected, whether we like it or not, is drug supply. India stopped exporting its drug because they have a big population. With that in mind, can the former Minister for Health, Ms. Modest, explain to us and by extension the public, what was the process? Where do the PPP order their supply from? Who was the main supplier? And what strategies was dealt with or put in place to combat any shortage in the immediate and medium term, talking about from 2022 to at least 2025? It's two questions. Where do the PPP get the medication from? And the second one, did the former administration came up with a strategy that it would have left in place to deal with potential shortage of medication that are needed?
Okay. Thank you. Now, we in the Eastern Caribbean, the OECS, it still exists, and as far as I know, it is still as vibrant as ever, and perhaps even more so. So I take your point about the problem with the supply chain, and from time to time, there will be certain materials, certain supplies that are needed that may be impacted by the supply chain, However, in terms of the sources, because this is not just a Grenada effort or an isolated country effort to source drugs, the OECS PPS had various sources for the same drugs. And they could command certain prices because of the volumes that they would import. Because if Grenada, with our 100,000 population, were purchasing medication for, let's say, diabetes, for argument's sake, the numbers would be very small, and perhaps the price we may have to pay would be much more than if we did bulk purchasing. I think everybody knows that. The bigger amount you buy, the less you have to pay. But also, because there are a number of members, and generally the numbers, that is why the issue of non-payment is so critical, because the OECS PPS team, that is pharmaceutical procurement services, but they also bring in reagents, they also bring in bandages and things for dressing and so on. It's a wide range of supplies. What they do is they search the world for suppliers. So they have a wider reach than we do. They have a better reputation than perhaps any single member state would, because they can sometimes put money up front. But if we fail to make our contribution for the goods that we ordered, then it impairs the ability to purchase, because they might have to, while they would wait on monies from us, they would have to meet the supplier's demand for payment in an appropriate time. So one of the things that we did was to ensure that over the last few years that we paid adequately. I am not saying that we paid, if we owed 2 million, we paid 2 million, but we paid according to what you will call a payment schedule that would appease them, but also allow them to purchase. So that was one of the major things that we did in terms of giving financial support to the OECS, Pharmaceutical Procurement Services, so that they can purchase and keep a good relationship with them. That's the main thing we did. But there are times when, what you mentioned, problems with the supply chain would happen, or for some other reason other than COVID. Then the government, because we have the NNP government and the economists like Brother Oliver and so, what they did was ensure that there was always some money that could be either used directly from the treasury, well, always is directly from the treasury, but some money that was there, or some monies that they could pull from other ministries, which it was not being used at that time and wasn't needed at that time, to prioritize medication. So we made it a priority, and so we had to order sometimes from other sources, even purchase from the private sector in the country, to ensure that certain things took place. So that is one. I don't know if it answers both or if it answers one, but I think that is where it lies. Prioritize the payments, most importantly, and government has to work with the payment schedule of the OECS PPS. And when it becomes necessary that the OECS PPS cannot provide, then we have to go there and we have to, that's why you have to manage the budget so carefully. So people say, why you leave all that money there? It was for situations like this, when you cannot get medication but you need it, so you could buy from other suppliers, perhaps that the OECS PPS doesn't deal with, because the OECS PPS does not deal with every supplier under the globe. And I hope that answers your question, but I am happy that we were able to do that over most of the time in office.
Thank you, because you sort of jump into the second part question that I had as to whether or not that the OECS, the PPS, was able to supply you adequately, or is the case sometimes they run out of a supplier and the government itself had to seek alternative. And you just mentioned there are times that the government would have had to procure outside of the PPS. Is that what you're saying?
That has happened from the private sector within country or outside in other countries. But I must say the OECS PPS functions so efficiently that those episodes were few and far between.
Okay, my other question has to do with, in a recent interview I had with a lawyer, he mentioned that in Grenada, in terms of gun violence, there is not a big rush or a heavy increase of civilian pulling gun on civilian. But what we have is a case where so the police officers are involved in gun violence. And the unfortunate thing about it, from November to May at the time when I did the interview, 3 persons was killed by officers through gun violence. But these persons who died, they were mentally ill. And so he's calling for the government to consider having a mental health care unit within the RGPF, similar like how we have the drug squad, or we have the RRU, or we have the fire. What is your view on having a mental health squad of people trained and be ready to deal with mental health persons within Grenada? What is your view as a person involved in health, a doctor by profession?
Thank you again. Yes, I think it would be very useful if it cannot amount to a whole department, but certainly resource persons, like what is the name of the clinical psychologist who was sent home. And at a time like this, and I don't want to name names and go into personalities, but we need the expertise of these people. And I recall when, for example, there was COVID and a number of persons in different areas had difficulties coping. Ministry of Social Services, Ministry of Education, they pulled health, pulled all the counselors and so on together and provide a cadre of persons who could provide support. We are not in a COVID crisis, but we are in a crisis in terms of crime. I heard you mention what the lawyer said. I do not know the statistics of all of these things, so I cannot really endorse. But what I must say is that there are prevailing conditions in our country that contribute to stress and anxiety at this time, prevailing conditions globally, because maybe persons who used to send remittances from overseas cannot do it now. And therefore, we have to look internally. And I did hear our dear Prime Minister, Present Prime Minister, say that we had to look internally at solving our own problem. It begins with us, but it begins with the government. And therefore, I think we have our Prime Minister well placed as Minister for National Security to look into that. Make persons available, whether you have a whole office for them, whether you have them that you can call on them, or they can do sessions with police to train them how to resolve conflict, how to deal with certain things. Because you notice every time, very often in the international news, particularly in the US, when things like that happen, when there's police violence, that they come out with people who say that they're training people and so on, how to resolve. So I think it is necessary. Let me make it short. I think it is something for the Minister for National Security to look at, because people will be getting more, as the stresses increase, people will be getting more aggressive, and we all have to learn to deal with them. So I'll broaden that, not just from the police, but other people in the public and among the youths and so on, that there will be classes to train them how to resolve conflict in an amicable, non-violent way.
Thank you. My other question is for Mr. Joseph, the chairman. Based on his professional training and the position he served in before being out of government. Now, within the first quarter of the year, Grenada received 29.6 million in total disbursements under disbursements and new borrowing. What it shows here is that the most of the money would have come from the government of Grenada loan from the Republic of China between January and March, and that totaled to 29.5 million. What is your view on the government of Grenada only receiving a little under 30 million in terms of disbursement and new borrowing for the first quarter of the year?
we have to look at the broader context. So, one, that it could be the government's ability to get more money or to borrow money because of the fiscal situation. Because if it's borrowing you're talking about, a complete analysis of the economy will be undertaken before any loan is advanced. If it's grant money, that is money then they do not have to repay. Most time it's on a bilateral basis. So China, as a friendly country, will give you a grant, or there are certain agencies that you can get grant. But grant is not now as easy to get as before. So, and of course, even the country giving you the grant will look at your performance. Remember, we have the Fiscal Responsibility Act, by which we set targets, and we achieve. And because of that, we received on 3 different occasions 25 million US from either of the World Bank, and Grenada was the only country in the OECS to receive it. So these things come based on your economic performance. And that would be a reason why the government did not get more money during the first quarter than we were able to secure.
Thank you. Well, I'll let you know that the disbursement, actually, most of it came from the existing loan with China for the airport development. That's for your information. And my final question is to, well, any one of you can pick it up. Last year we would have heard the big announcement of no school fees and for students going into secondary school who have to register. I think it was a case with primary schools too. Now, we are close to the end of the school year, and one of the things that happened before the school year officially closed is the registration of new students into secondary school. For the past couple of days, I have been gathering all the notice that has been put out. I've asked parents who I know have children who pass to send it for me, and the range of registering a child is from $130 to as much as $220 I've seen as the highest. What is your view on that registration that the children don't have to pay as to compare with the announcement that school is free? A lot of these registration cover something administrative fee, ID fee, report card fee, and things like that. What's you? Any one of you could step in and answer that school registration cost versus free education.
Thank you, Linda, for this question, and I would like to contribute here. Yes, we have heard the announcement of the removal of all school fees from this current administration at the primary and secondary level. However, we did not see the government assisting schools to meet their various costing during their operations. So what we are seeing now is schools finding a way to recover some of the costs that they have lost. So, in other words, because I have been looking at it myself, I have been looking at some of the registration information that schools put out, and they are now becoming creative in trying to recover those funds from parents. So it means here the government, again, has to remain true to their words and explain to the nation and the parents exactly what fees they are referring to in the removal or saying that no school fees would have to be paid by the parents. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, media colleagues, for your questions. We turn over again to Nancy McGuire.
Good morning again. I just wondered if anyone there could elaborate on the debushing program. One of the things the government had said was they're going to have farmers find their own laborers and do a new whole thing on the farm laborer program. but I don't see the connection between the debushing program or not having a debushing program and introducing this new program for farm labor. Can you make some suggestions as what should happen with the debushing program, and what would the cost of a debushing program be now? Because this is the time of year when the debushing program is usually active. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Nancy, you're correct. We had both programs going on, and we had a bigger budget, right? So the farm labor program was treated separately as a separate program that provided jobs and assisted farmers in clearing the land. So they both coexisted. Remember, the debushing is a seasonal program, and as you correctly pointed out, around this time, coming up to school, when school go to reopen, thousands of people were given jobs so that they can buy the school uniform and books and send their children to school. And that was the purpose, to assist these people. Remember, these people have no jobs, you know. So they look forward to the debushing program, the farm labor program, and other programs that the government had to assist them to receive this income. So we are very concerned when you look around the road now, the bush, because the rainy season start. Soon as the rainy season start, you know, you see the bush coming all and covering the road. And so we have to, in order to maintain the environment and provide jobs for these people, we would provide, we have this debushing program. It was called by some nice name. I don't know, I have two members of parliament here. I don't know if they remember the name they give it. The best program. And because all they're doing is giving names and nothing happening. So I still hope that we can see these gangs out, providing the income for these poor and vulnerable people to assist them in meeting the expenditure.
What would be the cost of it?
Well, Nancy, the cost will vary. It depends. If we decide, okay, for example, it's how you decide to budget for it then. So if we decide to spend 8 million, as we did, I'll give you the figures for the last program we had, it was $8 million. If this government come and they decide, well, we don't need to give 6 fortnights, as NMP did, or sometimes we vary to 8 fortnights, that will determine the cost. But what we have noticed that they have not budgeted for the debushing program, so we do not know, I cannot tell you how much money they have in the budget for that. All we are seeing is that we are not witnessing the gangs out on the road. So the cost will vary depending on how much money the government is willing to spend on the debushing program.
Thank you.
We have another question from Linda Streaker.
Thank you again, Anilon, and good morning to all again. This question is for the two MPs. You are in a parliament for the past year. Sitting in parliament following the proceeding, what has been your biggest challenge in terms of your ability to make serious contribution to the proceedings of parliament?
Well, I'll give a little piece. I must say that Parliament is governed by a manual and guidelines, standards. So you call it
Standing orders.
Standing orders. How the whole procedure, what must be done, when, who could do it, who could not do it. All of these things are done. And so we are used to it, and we accept generally where we could come in. There is an area called personal explanation. If one has that, one can do that. There's an area for ministers to give them ministerial statements. Of course, we are not ministers, so we cannot. But then again, we can speak on the adjournment, which we take advantage of. I remember the last sitting that all of us who were there spoke on the adjournment. And we are not prevented in any way. Some of the things that are allowed, though, are a bit questionable. And I don't want to go into details because everybody, you know, people are new and people learn different ways, different rates. But I want to take this opportunity to say here that our Grenada Women's Parliamentary Caucus, that is the caucus or a body of all women parliamentarians, present and past, regardless to your political affiliation. We have been meeting. This is a long-established body. We have been meeting, and we have met with some of the new members have come in. Several of us who were there before continue to be there. And what we have identified is that there are some areas where some training can be extremely useful in the parliamentary setting, and that was what we're working on. So from where I sit, most of it is because of growing pains, growing stages, and they're learning, and it takes time. But there are certain things, and I want to recall just one situation where I was very troubled. When, in answer to, because there's a section called questions, and that is where especially the opposition gets the opportunity to question certain things that either are happening or are not happening, and the reasons why, on behalf of the nation, based on the concerns that they raise and concerns that we have. So there are two things we have concern about: the shortcuts to pass some bills through all its stages, when we feel that it's going to impact on people's lives very seriously, maybe sometimes negatively, and that they need to be educated on it and consulted on it before that happens so they can be better prepared. And we've had several instances of that. I must say in recent times I've noticed a change, and I want to compliment the Parliament for that, and of course the government side for listening to our concerns in that regard, and to give certain bills, give it up only for first reading so that there's an opportunity for consultation. So I have noticed a change. I hope that lasts, but that was a big challenge for us. The other one is the way questions are answered or not answered. And I just will say here that the parliamentarians, the ministers, are responsible to answer questions. They have staff, they have teams, and so the kind of excuses that it's not me, it's somebody else. The government has to endorse everything. Government has to take a responsibility for everything, and they should know, even when there's a body that is supposed to be non-partisan or objective or whatever, that is doing something, the government has to know. So the way questions are answered or not answered still remains a concern, and I hope that we continue with certain bills. And I am not saying that we didn't put through certain bills all its stages. There are times when government will do that. But if it's not urgent, and if there is an opportunity to consult, I think we must do that, so I hope that continues.
As a sitting member of Parliament, some of the challenges I would identify, let me first of all say, because we follow the standing orders, the challenges within the sitting or the proceedings are not that great. However, we must identify some of the disrespect meted out to some members of the opposition while making their contribution. It's an indication that members of the government do not acknowledge the contribution of opposition members towards their contribution in the House of Parliament. I would also like to mention the fact that as MPs, members of Parliament representing different constituencies, we are not afforded the opportunity to serve our constituents in in a most effective and efficient way simply because Parliament did not cater for that, and governments in its own wisdom have not been prudent or have not seen that it is important that constituents can go to us as MPs to receive or to benefit from certain government programs and resources. This has not been made available and affordable to us to serve our constituents in the best way possible. Thank you.
We will accept the final question from Nancy McGuire.
Well, thank you again. This is for the NNP chair. Now that you've been in opposition for 1 year and you're looking internally at your party, how are things going on the ground with the rebuilding, etc.? Can you just update us on that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, we have held now 15 constituency meetings. So we have covered the entire state of Grenada by meeting with every constituency. We are in process now of putting in place the various constituency group. Every constituency lead, we have appointed 15 constituency lead, and they have the task of forming the constituency group. They go out to the various polling divisions and work with our members to establish functioning group so that we can, again, have our structure in place and have our people working together. And I must say, from the meetings that we have had throughout the length and breadth of Grenada, we have been well received. These meetings have been well attended, and on the ground, that is where we are focusing, and I think we are heading in the right direction by re-energizing the party and ensuring that the party structure is in place as we move forward to form the next government.
Thank you very much, Chairman Joseph. Thank you very much to you, members of the media, for your questions. Thank you very much to the listeners and viewers across the state of Grenada. This has been our press conference by the New National Party. I hand over to the party chairman for a quick announcement.
Yeah. Let me, first of all, thank the other members of the panel and to you, the viewing and the listening public. I want to take this opportunity to express our deepest sympathy to Brother Nimrod Olivier and the passing of his dear mom, and Sister Rosalind Felix of St. David's on the passing of her husband. They are both executive members of the party, very hard-working members, and I join with the rest of the party in wishing you God's blessings, strength, and please be comforted to know that the party stands with you during your very difficult time.
Thank you very much, Chairman Joseph. Again, to reiterate the expression of condolence to Brother Nimrod Olivier and the other executive member on the passing of their close relative and family members. This has been our press conference by the New National Party. We do commit to continuing the work on the ground for our constituents and in the interests of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. I thank you.